I'm actually loving the situation in Ukraine right now because I knew when this conflict started, I had to debate with some of my friends whose only source of information is CNN. Some of them don't know how manipulative all these media houses can be because they only represent a certain interest. So, in the situation of Ukraine, a lot of people will have the opinion based on what they hear and read in the media that Ukraine stood a chance against Russia. The truth remains that if it were America that was battling out with Ukraine, America would have deployed their, fighter jets, flew over the skies of Ukraine and bombed that country to the ground. But President Putin has shown restraint, considering the affinity of Ukraine to Russia. So he was, going to it gradually without deploying full force. That is exactly why this war has taken up to 3 years right now. And a lot of people now feel that Ukraine has proven strong enough not to have been dominated by Russia. But that is not the situation. It's just Putin not trying to wipe out the entirety of Ukraine. And the Russian armed forces have stayed very professional in this very conflict by trying to target only military infrastructures and the rest of it without, with very low civilian casualties. But if it were America would have, deployed their full force and make sure that Ukraine is taken down within the next, possibly 1 week or so. So President Putin needs to be commended for the way and the manner he has handled this very conflict. And it also shows the level of professionalism on the part of Russian military. Right now, as it stands right now, Trump has come in. Trump identifies, a lot of people actually think that Trump is a Putin's puppet. No, Trump is not a puppet to Putin. Trump only understands the situation in Ukraine because he knew for sure that Russia cannot be defeated with the barrels of gun. So the best way to end this conflict is to negotiate with Russia in order to have an amicable settlement. So Trump understands that. So no matter the amount of money that America and their Western allies pumps into Ukraine, they were never, ever going to defeat Russia. It was impossible to do. So Trump knew this. So instead of continuing the fight, sending America's taxpayers' dollars to Ukraine in order to continue to finance the war, Trump now decided to negotiate directly with President Putin. President Putin has always been a diplomatic president, always open for negotiation if you're bringing something reasonable to the table. Because Russia has raised concerns about NATO's encroachment to their border, but America, on the other hand, never paid attention to what the Russians was complaining about. And this is exactly what led to this very military operation in Ukraine. But right now that America has elected a president that wants to listen, that actually wants to negotiate in order to bring an everlasting peace to Ukraine and to also reassure Russia that NATO will not continue to advance to its borders, Putin is open for a negotiation. But the funny thing right now is that Putin and America are now negotiating without any European representative. That is the most funniest aspect of this, because the Europeans has failed on their own to recognize the implication of this very war that America, led by Joe Biden, was trying to, trigger a war in the European continent, which will in turn affect European economy, destabilize Europe, and, destroy Europe on the process. But they were dancing to the Americans to the tune of Joe Biden's policy, forgotten the implication the war would have in the European continent. So right now, as Trump has come in, he is now directly negotiating with Putin without involving any European countries at all. Do you know why he is doing this? Because in 2014, you remember there was a coup in 2014 in Ukraine when a democratically elected president was removed from power, and the president, Viktor Yanukovych, happens to be of Russian descent. So since then, the other part of Ukraine, that is the Kiev regime, began to shell and bombard the Donbass, forcing so many residents there to migrate to Russia. So Russia needed to, intervene in order to have an amicable settlement between that part of Ukraine that was majorly occupied by ethnic Russians with the other side of Ukraine. And there was what we call, or what they called, a Minsk I and Minsk II agreement. Unfortunately, Europe never get to force the current regime in Ukraine, that is Volodymyr Zelensky and his government, to abide by that very agreement, though it was Petro Poroshenko that was president when the agreement was reached. So France, Germany, and there's another country that was, signatory to that very agreement, that was also represented during that very agreement. They did not push Ukraine to abide by its own obligations. So that is exactly what led to this war. But people that do not know how the whole thing started would always believe that it was Putin. Putin is an aggressor. Putin wants to take Ukraine by force. This shouldn't be happening in modern time. None of them has managed to study the situation as to understand exactly what triggered this war in the first place. Right now, everything is in Putin's hands, and Putin is going to negotiate to Russia's advantage, because the ethnic Russians in Ukraine, they are not migrant there. This is their ancestral home. So if you're negotiating, there must be guarantees for their protection if they have to remain part of Ukraine. But right now, as we speak, Putin has made it clear that those people from the Donbass and other Russian-dominated areas has now been recognized as part of Russia, meaning that by the end of this very negotiation, Ukraine will be left with a very little territory. In fact, it will be so little that they will no longer be considered as a country. So at the end of the day, Ukraine, Europe has lost, while Russia and America has won.